Okay, good evening. My name is Tom Rude. I'm going to be substituting for Vic Vaccaro, who's normally our seminar leader. Vic isn't able to come tonight, so he asked me to pitch in for him, so I'm here to do that. I'm the former chapter president for Skidaway and also CCA Georgia chairman, and I'm delighted to be here to lead the seminar tonight. We have a really great lineup for you tonight, and we'd like to kind of get into it. Hopefully you've had a chance to see Jeff over there at the raffle table. We have a great raffle prize tonight. Its value will go up based on how well Chad does in talking about what kind of opportunity you might have fishing with him. Half-day fishing trip with Chad. I think you'll agree after you hear Chad tonight that it would be a great experience for anyone to be out with Chad. Tickets are $5 each. 3 for 10, 7 for 20 over there. See Jeff about that. Okay. What we have on store for tonight, we have our normal fishing stories. We'll be talking a little bit about clinics. The banquet will come up. Chad will be our guest speaker here. We'll get to him in a few minutes, and then we'll do a meeting wrap up with our president, Dave DeVore. Let's see, fishing stories. Do we have any fishing stories tonight? We normally take a few minutes just to talk about anything that anybody has had some success with fishing recently. Time to tell a little tale if you would like to. Anybody have a story they'd like to tell? We have a couple of pictures here that I wanted to show you. I don't know, Rick is out. I just saw Rick. Rick, you've got a picture here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that picture is all about.
That was February. Caught some grouper, but it wasn't grouper season. We used the descender for this to give it an opportunity to recover from that deep water, which was really nice. But it was a great day. It was cold, but it was a great day.
Great, good use of the descender as well. All right, now the picture on the right up there. Anybody identify what that might be? Anybody know? It was caught here in Deer Creek, freshwater lagoon. I think maybe Rick might be able to tell us about that.
I was fishing with my son in freshwater, and we were just using crankbaits. And I had a couple of old pieces of shrimp, and I just hung them on a bottom rig and threw them out there. And when I brought it back in, I figured out maybe I picked up a catfish or something. But it was this nasty eel-looking thing. And Vic did some background looking for me. It's an American eel, and it's a very strange kind of creature because it's born in the ocean, in salt water, migrates itself into freshwater, lives in freshwater its whole life, and then goes back out to the ocean to breed and then die, almost, like trout, it seems like, or a salmon, excuse me. But well, I had no interest in catching that one or any more just like it. It was about 2 feet long and just nasty and slimy looking. And
it's interesting. This is not the first time.
I didn't see any teeth in it. I didn't talk to it. I didn't have any interest in a long conversation.
This isn't the first time that Neil's been caught. As a matter of fact, this has been several years ago now, but in the kids' lagoon, during the kids' fishing tournament, the kids' fishing derby, one of the kids caught a Neil, which was very unusual. Never saw one before or since. So, but they are here, obviously, and they are slimy little things. Lagoon guide. We have a lagoon guide that we have developed here over the years. It's a great guide. If you haven't had a chance to look at one of our lagoon guides, we have them on the back table back there for a donation of, I think it's $10. You could get yourself a lagoon guide, but it has all the lagoons, what they are, fresh or saltwater. And the book is the guide is just filled with great tips about how to catch fish in these lagoons. And I think it'd be a very good resource for you if you don't have one. I think most of you probably, raise your hand if you got a lagoon guide. Yeah, everybody. Yeah, you got to have a lagoon guide to fish here. And we're just happy to have it ready for you if you need it. If you're new here, you have to have one of these so you can tell. Okay. We've got a few things coming up here I'd like to tell you about. We have had some clinics lately, which have been very well attended. And so we're scheduling another 2 of them actually on the same day, April the 8th. These will be saltwater spin cast clinics. And be on the 8th from 9 to 11, and then we'll do it again in the afternoon from 1 to 3. So you'll be able to sign up for this. Not sure, Bill, when would the request go out for that? You know, tomorrow? Okay, so there'll be a request for sign up for this clinic. And I would suggest you get on it quickly if you're, because we're going to have a limited number of people, I think, for the clinic. 5 people? 5 people. So first 5 to get on will come to this clinic. Obviously, I think 5 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon. Yeah, okay, so. All right. Again, this is one that we held a couple of weeks ago with Robert Hale. I think we had a bunch of people at that one. So they're very popular, and a lot can be found out about how to fish these lagoons with these clinics. So if you haven't had a chance to go to one of the clinics before, or if you're still new enough that you haven't really been able to find your way around and how to fish these lagoons, this is an excellent way to learn about it. Yes. I don't know. Yeah, this one was held in number 1. I don't know which one we're going to go to. I don't know if we'll go back to this one or not. Paulette just went into the other room there. But we'll find that out for you. And it'll probably, Paulette, do you know what lagoon this will be on? Okay. All right. So to be determined. You might have some input into it if you're there. So, okay. Here's a saltwater fly fishing clinic that we're going to be holding April 29th, 9 o'clock till noon. Dr. Bud Robertson. Anybody know Dr. Bud? He's a pretty good resource, great fly fisherman. Again, this one's saltwater, artificial flies, and you'll learn how to rig your line, select the flies, how to cast, etc. Paulette, how many for this one? 10. So there'll be 10. We'll be sending out a request for this one to sign up as well. So again, mark that down, April 29th, 9 to noon. Fly fishing, and you're going to get trained on how to fly fish tonight. So this will be a great time to display some of what your knowledge gained would be from tonight. Okay, this is just to kind of let you know that we've got some kids fishing events coming up here in the next month or two. And we spent, a few of us spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of weeks getting our fishing equipment lined up. We got 83, is that right, Rick? 85 fishing rods and reels in our fishing shed over at the Kids Lagoon. Every once in a while, every couple of years, we get them all relined. So we had Bass Pro put new lines on them for us. We put hooks and bobbers and everything, get them all ready to go, get all the backlash out of the Zebco reels that the kids have used over the last few years. So we're ready to go. Again, you can see our shed right behind the pavilion at the Kids Lagoon. That's where we have all of our equipment for fishing there. Most of our activities, kids activities, we have at the Kids Lagoon right behind the fire station over in Oak Ridge. Everybody been to the Kids Lagoon? It's a great place. If you want to fish there, you have to bring a kid. So we don't have kids to rent, but if you have one, you could bring them over there and you can fish too. And we've got a fish hatchery there now, bluegills. And some of the bluegills bigger than your hand. No kidding. We have fish feeders there. We feed those fish every day. I think it's at 2 o'clock now, 1 o'clock. We feed them every day. And if you want to bring somebody over there to watch the lagoon boil, get there about 10 minutes before 1 o'clock and then watch when the feeders go off. It's absolutely amazing to watch. I mean, it's just, I don't know how many fish we have in here, thousands. And they reproduce. And like I said, we have a hatchery there now. So it's great. And the last several years, we haven't had to stock there. We used to have to stock every year. And since we put the feeders in there, we have our own hatchery now. So it's a great place to go. If you ever have kids in town, bring them to the Kids Lagoon and fish there. You'll catch fish. I can't guarantee it, but if you're looking for what to use, believe it or not, we have, and Bob Culp will tell you, we have dog food that you buy over at Publix that works great there, really does. And we use it for the kids' fishing derby, and it does. It somehow mimics the pellets that we feed the fish, so they love them. So we're ready to go. We'll have words out pretty soon on some of the events that are coming up. We have some outside people coming in. We have some kids from, I think the Girl Scouts are going to be here this year. We're going to have some Boy Scouts, Safe Shelter, Salvation Army, Bethesda. We have a lot of kids from off the island come in and get their first time fishing at that Kids Lagoon. So it's a great resource for us. And I think you really find it good if you have kids coming into town as well. We had an event here at the church, as a matter of fact, over the weekend. It was our first attempt to do this. We had a kids event here. We invited kids to come and paint wooden fish. And the idea was that these kids would paint these wooden fish and we would use them at our banquet that's coming up in the middle of April as centerpieces at the banquet for the banquet tables. So the kids came and they caught some fish here. Let's see if I can show you, or they painted some fish. Okay, you can see it. How to, there you go. Those are the fish they painted. We had 10 children paint 18 fish in about 3 hours. And they just did a great job. It was really a fun event. We had 4 ladies from the Landings Art Association come and help us put this on. Paulette was our person organizing this. It was a great morning. The kids that got fun, they got paint all over everything, including themselves. And guess what? There were 10 children there, and there were 10 prizes, coincidentally. And I just want to give you some categories that the ladies made up for the winners. We had the most original, the best decorating technique, the most colorful, most realistic, the best decorated, the best colors, most fish painted. We had one young girl painted 5 fish. So she was quick. She was very quick. This one I really liked, most sparkly. We had them glitter and so forth to make them nice and sparkly. We had best bejeweled. We had jewels that they were able to put on the fish. And then we had Rocco Dominguez. He was the best and the youngest. He was age 2. And he painted the fish. So it was great. So now we have fish for our centerpieces for our banquet tables. And those of you that sign up for our banquet, you'll be able to see what those look like. So, am I back here now? There we go. Okay. All right, speaking of the banquet, our annual banquet auction is coming up on April the 18th. It's 4 weeks from tomorrow. It'll be at the Palmetto Club, 6 o'clock. This year's theme is cranking it up. We are, as the CCA chapter, we are just cranking everything up, doing everything we can to increase our activities that we have, sponsor. So we thought a good thing would be to show everybody how cranked we really are. We're pretty cranked. Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so cranking it up on April the 18th. How many people have registered for tickets here? Okay. I would say you need to go to CCA Skidaway.org and sign up. We're trying to get about 200 people there. We normally have about that number. We've got some really great silent auction and live auction items lined up for that evening. It's a great affair. We're going to have a lot of fun, and I think we're going to have some military people there this year. We have in the past, and they're coming again. So it's really a great fun evening, and I would encourage you all to go online and sign up and come and enjoy that and support CCA Georgia. It's a great evening out. Okay, just a reminder that we do record these meetings They are on the Zoom, and if you happen to miss a meeting, you can actually dial in to our website, and you could see all the meetings there listed, and you could review them and not miss anything if you can't be here. So don't forget to do that if you miss one of our seminars. Okay, tonight's seminar, fly fishing with Chad. Chad has been here for, how long have you been here now, Chad? A few years? How many years? I know, but since you've been back. 7. So Chad's a member of CCA Georgia in the Savannah chapter. He's a member of the CCA Georgia board, and we're proud and pleased to have Chad here tonight to talk about fly fishing. So Chad, why don't you come on up and give us a little bit of what you know. Okay, great. I'd ask you guys to kind of stand in front
We
of
have
us.
to stand. Do we have to hold hands while we do this?
No, you don't have.
Only if you want to. How y'all doing tonight? Good. So yeah, as Tom mentioned, I've been doing these seminars this time of the year now since I think 2016, and kind of cover yearly just a kind of general red fishing in Savannah, fly fishing specifically, and kind of the basics around that, best times of the year to fish, where we're fishing, the tides we're fishing, stuff like that. And then Doug Painter was going to kind of chime in on lagoons, since I don't live out here and fish the lagoons.
Good evening, everyone. Great to have everyone here tonight. You know, we have on this island all these great lagoons, and you can fly fish all of these lagoons, freshwater and saltwater. Catch redfish, bluegill, largemouth bass. It's a wonderful place, especially to learn to fish. And recognizing the new interest we are having in fly fishing, we have a lot of these clinics. We also have every month a new thing called Bluegills and Brews, where we go out in the evening, choose a lagoon, fish for about an hour, and then have some beers and snacks after that. It's also perfect time if you have not gotten into fly fishing. We offer free lessons at every Bluegills and Brews. I see my latest student sitting right there. Dawn, how are you tonight? So it's a great opportunity to learn to fly fish. And we have, as we say, it's just a cart ride away. And if you do well, then you can go fishing with this guy in the big water.
So as you guys heard, I grew up here in Savannah, grew up on actually just on the Vernon River, right down there on Bewley Avenue. My family still lives there. So I know this water really well. I moved out west in 2011, made my way to Montana, or sorry, 2008. I made my way to Montana in 2011, started guiding fly fishing out there, guided out there for about 6.5 years, spent some time guiding in Patagonia and South America as well. And kind of my last winter in Montana was negative 54 degrees. So I had started spending some winters in Asheville and doing some fishing and guiding there, and then kind of realized I could come back home and chase fish year round as opposed to being kind of closed out by winter seasons out west. So moved back to Savannah in 2015-16 era, still kind of went back to Montana once or twice, and then started Tall Tides Charters in 2019. And this whole time I've been back in Savannah, I've been running Rivers and Glen fly shop downtown. Actually left Rivers and Glen at the end of the year to pursue guiding full time. I've got a few guys that work with me now, and it's been great getting back into full-time fishing. It's a lot more fun than having to be at a job, an actual job. Red fishing in Savannah, you know, we get a lot of calls. Savannah, as you guys know, if you've been downtown recently in the last 2 years, has become a big destination for people. And a lot of those people realize that we are on the coast and there's fishing to be had. So we get a lot of questions about, you know, the right times of year to fish, the the beauty of Savannah is you can fish year round. That being said, there are peaks and seasons. Right now we are in the month of March, which if you could take 1 month out of the year to fish in Savannah, that'd be the one that I'd say go somewhere else. It's a really hard month to fish just because, as you guys can tell, our weather's all over the place. The wind's been blowing for like 45,000 days, it feels like. Weather fluctuations cause the water temps to drop and lower between like 5 and 8 degrees sometimes. I think it's already been 3 degrees this week. So it just makes the fish, they're like in their wintering patterns, which typically like wintering patterns means they kind of get back into their big schools to kind of protect themselves for the winter. And then as the summer and the water temps warm up, the water gets less clear. They kind of go and you still find schools of fish, but you're more likely to find smaller groups of fish throughout the spring through fall. But in the month of March, they're trying to come out of their wintering season, but it's still winter, and then it's summer, and then it's winter. And so they're just confused. They don't know what to do. You have really clear water in the wintertime. So it makes for beautiful fishing, because if you fished in Savannah, you know, most of the time it's like fishing in a Yoo-hoo bottle, in chocolate milk. So we get clear water in the wintertime, which, you know, you get on these big flats, in the creeks chasing these fish. You see the bottom of the river like you've never seen before, 4 to 6 feet of visibility sometimes. But that also makes the fishing a little more technical. Summertime, when you have dirty water, you can plop that big weighted fly, you know, right on a fish's nose sometimes. And when they don't have a big school around them to help kind of their, you know, like the mass of people that are kind of hard to control, but individual people are a little easier to control. Same thing with redfish. You can spook one redfish in a school and it'll swim to the whole school and spook the whole thing, where the summertime you're casting to singles or doubles or triples. If you blow up one little group, you're not going to potentially ruin that whole spot to fish in. So technically, fishing in the fall and the winter is really great because it allows you to kind of get better as an angler. You know, the rule is if you can see the fish, they can most likely see you. So you got to be able to cast a little bit further, and have a little bit lighter presentation. You sometimes throw in lighter tippets and stuff like that, but it's a ton of fun because you get to see a lot of the action. As we get into springtime, which we're on our way into right now, get into April, fishing gets a little more consistent, weather gets a little more consistent. And then we start to get flood tides. So right now we're mostly fishing kind of the focus is around the low tide with the hours on either side of it. As we get in the summertime, we kind of fish throughout the tide, and in the spring as well. And we get what we call flood tides. And if you've heard anything about red fishing, especially in the low country, flood tides are kind of like, you know, the jam. They're a lot of fun to fish. So what happens is we have big tides here. And that's why it's so specific when we fish. If someone just calls and says, I want to fish Tuesday next week, I don't necessarily book that trip right away. I want to look at the tide, make sure that I think, depending on where the tide's falling that day, we're going to be able to get out either before the wind picks up, rain, whatever it may be, sun gets too high, and kind of highlights us on the water for the fish to see us. So it's very specific. Whenever it gets up in the grass, those fish get up there and they tail. There's a lot of flats around the landings. Pretty much the entire perimeter of the island is covered in grass flats where these fish do, and there's plenty of places you can actually walk out here and wade fish to tailing redfish in the spring through the fall. Fall is obviously I don't know, there's a single fishery that fall isn't the peak of it. So when people say they want to come fish, prime season, September through October is usually what fills up the quickest for me. You get cooler temperatures, school's back in session, less crowded waterways, less crowded boat ramps, less crowded flats, you know, all the above. Water starts to cool off. The fish know that they're getting ready to work into their wintering patterns, so they get a little hungrier. A couple old locals that have been fly fishing here for years used to joke that, you know, you can catch them on a shoestring that time of year. It's not too hard. They're pretty hungry for it. But summertime is great because you get to chase redfish. The picture they used up there is a Jack Crevalle. If no one here is familiar with those, or if you fish down the Keys, maybe you are. The reason Jacks here are a little different than down in the Keys is you're usually fishing for inshore Jacks down in the clear waters of Florida. They range anywhere from, you know, you'll get a school of 5-pounders to 10, 15-pounders. And they're a ton of fun, but if you're trying to tarpon fish or permit fish or even bonefish, they can kind of get in the way of your target species. we target them here. We get a run of offshore jacks that come in and around Savannah from the yacht club docks. You can catch them off of the Savannah River. I've caught them over by the Isle of Hope Marina, all over Ossabaw Sound, but it's really, and then definitely up and down the beaches while you're tarpon fishing in the summertime. You can find them. It is a thrill because you usually don't see them in small groups. They're usually in much larger groups, and when they come, they're kind of like a freight train coming down the waterway. You see a lot of wakes being pushed, and then if you catch them in a feeding frenzy, it's lights out fun. I think the most we caught on fly one day was 7, and they were all over 30 pounds. And I think the last 2 we caught, we were going in, we'd called it for the day, and we saw a big school again as we were heading in, and we decided to cast out. We both hooked up and immediately regretted it because it's just a lot of weight to pull in. It's a lot of fun, but there is such thing as catching too many fish sometimes. But yeah, and then in the spring up in Beaufort, we have cobia inshore, which is incredibly unique. It's something that I don't think there's really anywhere else. You can catch some inshore, around the Keys in Florida, stuff like that. But it's a really special fishery up there. It's a subspecies of cobia that actually run up the Broad River to spawn in the spring. So for the month of May, they're actually protected for catch and release only. So it's great because if you've been fishing for them at all of the last 10 years up there, 5 years ago, before they were catch and release, it was, packed full of boats, but now you can get up there and, run around in a skiff or a tower boat or whatever you want all day looking for them. And they're just swimming up on the surface and usually catch those in the jacks with, anywhere from 10 to 12 weights. But it's a ton of fun. Tarpon fishing obviously is getting really, really big in Georgia, with more crowds and more pressure in Florida. So there's more people coming up here. The tarpon have always been coming up here. It's not that they just have started to come into Savannah. There's a picture on my wall of my dad with the tarpon on the St. Mary's River back in 1975. But they're definitely becoming more of a interest to anglers, not just for bait fishing, but for sight fishing and whatnot. It definitely presents a challenge that we don't have clear water like in Florida to target them in. So it's a lot harder. You got to spend a lot more time trying to figure them out, but it's definitely possible. But yeah, it's fly fishing in Savannah is definitely a growing sport. And I mean, I feel like there's more people that come to this meeting every year whenever I do it. So it's really cool to watch. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, so great question. If you trout fish before, the 5 weight is kind of like, kind of do all weight for trout fishing, whether even bass and brim. We've always said that the 8 weight is kind of the same for saltwater life. Bonefish, redfish, baby tarpon, snook, you can kind of accomplish everything. I've kind of moved into fishing more 9 weights in Savannah for a couple different reasons. We have a lot of oysters. In the wintertime when you're fishing for redfish, cold weather makes them a little bit more spry, so they fight a little bit harder. So especially if, say, you're rolling down a creek or a flat and you find a big group of fish, you catch one, you don't want to spend 15 minutes trying to get it in with an 8 weight. The technology in rods is so great now that a 9 weight is lighter than 8 weights were 10 years ago or even 2 years ago. So you have a little bit more backbone. The wind's always blowing here, so you get a little more punch in the wind. And then if you do hook into that bigger fish, you're going to have a better opportunity to try to land it a little quicker. And then especially in the summertime when you're fishing flood tides and 115 degrees out, and you're on a grass flat and that water is really warm, it allows you to get that fish in a little bit quicker so you can release it safely. A lot of times when I'm on those flats, I'll actually pull off the flat into deeper moving water current to release a fish, just to give it a little more chance so he's not trying to swim off in kind of warm, dead water almost. But yeah, 9 weight, 9 foot, or 8 weight, 9 foot rods are kind of best for Savannah with weight forward floating lines. I do fish a clear tip on pretty much every rod I have. All that really does for me is it kind of extends the leader, so you can fish a shorter leader, be a little more accurate. You're not worried about getting caught up in the wind as much. But if you're fishing wintertime, schools, clear water, it gives you a little bit more kind of stealth to be able to cast some of those fish. Flies. So my fly box has like 3 different flies in it. The one thing with redfish, as opposed to almost any other fish I fish for, is they're either going to eat it or they're not. They're either in the mood or they're not in the mood. So it's not so much like trout fishing or a lot of fishing where you're trying to match the hatch, figure out what they want. The culture's kind of grown to throw bigger flies in general everywhere because I think they're fun to tie, they're fun to look at, they're easier to tie on for everyone. But smaller size 4 to 6 flies, work pretty well. Black and purple, I use probably 70 to 80% of the time. In the summertime, that's pretty much all I use because of our all color water. It highlights really well in dirty water, but also if you have hungry fish or you're fishing to a big school of fish that are moving around, if you throw something super light and tan in front of them, they might miss it and not see it. But then my other color I throw is like a tan or a light tan or brown, and it's for the exact opposite reason. If I'm fishing high sun, clear water, no clouds in the sky, and those fish are seeming really spooky, you want to throw something as natural as possible. So it's you're not trying to get more of an angry reaction. You're trying to get more of a natural reaction with an eat on something like that. There are thousands of fly patterns in the world, and there's so many that are tied for redfish. But like I said, in the fall, you can catch them on a shoestring if you wanted to. And so it's not so much about trying to have the right. You want to have good color choices, which I try to go light or dark are 2 best choices. Sometimes this time of year, I'll go white. I don't know why they seem to like that when they don't want anything else, but sometimes white works, just like with bass. I don't know what the correlation there is. And then weed guards are extremely important. If you go to Rivers and Glen and look at their redfish flies, you won't find a single one that does not have a weed guard on it. You won't know the importance of a weed guard until you go to cast to that fish and it hooks that oyster about 6 inches to the left of where that fish is sitting, and you can't get it off without spooking the fish. And it's really frustrating. But weed guards are really important. You can always cut them off, but if you're out there, you can't put them on. The only reason you really cut them off if you're fishing water that you don't need them, and it'll cause the fly to spin. We put a little spin in your leader. No. So yeah, no, for sure. So no, who knows what I'm skipping? There's so much information out there for this kind of stuff. It's like we could have this conversation for 4 hours. But to go back onto flies, this time of year, I usually go with a lighter weighted fly if I'm fishing on big flats, because I don't want something that's going to make a big kind of splash when it hits the water. And so I'll go for a lighter fly, but then I'll fish fluorocarbon tippet, something that I know is going to sink. And if I'm fishing in a creeks or somewhere where I know I'm going to be fishing a little bit deeper water, I'll fish a heavier weighted fly with like dumbbell eyes or something like that. And flies are typically always, biggest fly I'll fish is a 4 or 2, smallest is a 6 or an 8, as far as hook size. And then the length of the fly, I wouldn't fish anything over like a 3-inch fly. At that point, you're going to spook off. Typically, I find that you catch smaller redfish on bigger flies because they're the ones that they're dumb. They're new to the game. They don't know what's going on. They're the ones you see on the docks all the time that are the little small babies because they're not used to it. So the smaller flies, I typically think your more mature, larger fish are going to eat. And those are the fish you're typically going to find on your flats. You're not going to find your schools of, puppy drum. Yes, sir.
Drilling down on something you said, talking about the tippet area.
Mhm.
You said tip. Are you using sink tips?
I don't use sink tips unless I'm like going to dock light fish at night for trout. I'll use those in the winter or fall time. But no, it's usually fish weight forward lines. And there's a few companies out there now that make a weight forward line that has a 6, 8, 10 foot, what they call a ghost tip on the end. It's just a clear poly extension of the fly line. And it's usually, and it's not a floating part, it's an intermediate piece. So it's great because at the low tide, when you're fishing kind of big open areas, shallow water, spooky fish, it allows that lighter weighted fly to get down. But then when you're fishing your flood tide flats, you're fishing so close that you're not super worried about an intermediate tip on there. So,
But if you didn't have that line, create something like you put on a Yep.
You could, yeah, there's, I think Rio makes a bunch in SA, and I mean, there's Portland, there's so many fly line companies out there, but yeah, there's I think they call them Versatips. You can, and those are great, especially if you want to go dock light fishing one night, or you know you're going to go in a creek that a bunch of trout stack up in, but they're 4 feet below the surface. So it's a good option. Do you have another question? Oh, sorry. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
We're talking about, it sounds like you were talking about your side is after the or you targeting which one of the content.
So this time of year, I'm going to try to add a couple flood tide charters the next couple of days. It's first big flood tides of the year. We're going to see if we can find any. But low tide typically, so you have a 10 a.m. positive 1 foot low tide. My goal is to get out as early as possible and kind of follow that low tide out, because you get the fish feeding off of the flat. And then or off of out of the grass or out of the creeks or off of the higher flats and kind of more into the sound. And then dead low, just like dead high, there's no current moving. And so typically your fish kind of just sit, and that's lasts for about an hour. You'll still find some moving around, but for the most part, when you get lack of current out there, the fish don't really like that. They like the moving water. It moves food around, moves water around, keeps them happy. So usually just kind of cruise around looking for fish sitting around. And then as that tide starts to come in, those fish are moving back up into those areas to feed more. You're trying to target them in those areas. And same with the flood tides. You're trying to catch them getting up on the flats, feeding up on the flats. Without current, they kind of sit down, chill on the flats. I try not to move around and look for them too much, because they're in the grass. So if they're not moving in the grass, you're not really going to see them. You end up, if you pull around in that kind of slack tide, you end up just kind of spooking all your fish off the flat. So you kind of want to sit, wait. One makes a little wake or something, you go cast to that, and then as the tide starts to move, you'll see them as they're swimming off the flats. Yeah, so the flies we're using, dry flies. The only thing we would use that would be considered a dry fly in saltwater would be like a popper or a topwater gurgler. We've always joked about throwing little grasshoppers out there just to see if they'd eat it, which they do eat topwater sometimes, so they might. But the closest thing to relate it to would just be streamer fishing for trout or bass, like freshwater bass. Of course not. No, I do not. Like you can buy a gulp and stuff like that, and the reality is it's not like bait fishing where you're throwing a popping cork out and it's just floating down through a stream of fish, and you got that live shrimp or even dead bait on there floating and they're seeing it. With fly fishing, you're casting, hopefully more often than not blind casting, you're casting to a specific fish. So you're hoping that fish sees that fly. I think the moment is too short to scent it. That it's not going to hold the scent long enough. After you cast it a few times, the scent's going to be gone. So you need to be dunking it every few minutes. But it's more like the difference in and don't get me wrong, I've sat under plenty of baited deer stands. It's the difference in sitting under a baited deer stand and sitting in the middle of the woods with a bow and arrow. Fly fishing is more like hunting. You're trying to find a fish to cast to. And that's what makes it so alluring, because you're not just out there. I mean, granted, you catch them blind casting, and we do a lot of that whenever we're trying to find fish. But the thrill of seeing that fish, presenting the fly, convincing that fish that fly is real enough to eating it and watching it, it's just, that's what I mean, I just get chilled when I was talking about it. It's really, really fun. Oh no, not at all. Yeah, I mean, you should definitely soak yeah, I mean, there's nothing, I'm not going to scoff at you for doing it. You got to catch fish somehow. It just depends on, what you want to do with it. But I don't think you have to be successful. Yes and no. I do sometimes, but the reality with, fish is that they're hard to land sometimes, and you have a better advantage with a barbed hook. I will say that redfish are one of the toughest fish I've ever caught, as far as just how you can beat them up. And I've never had an issue with the barbed hook on a redfish. The biggest issue is them swallowing it too deep, and I use one of those release tools to get hooks out. But you know, the trout fishermen from Montana, like we pinched, everything was catch or release out there. Cutthroat, trout have very sensitive mouths. I don't use treble hooks even when I'm artificial fishing. I take all my treble hooks off just because it's also just keeps you from getting stuck in the hands, because those things just, I mean, they're awful. But yeah, no, I do sometimes. They usually get pinched the first time you pull one out of a fish, and I don't ever change that. So it's, if you looked at my box right now, half of them probably would have a barb that's kind of curled over from having a fish on it at one point. Yeah, so 90% of fly rods out there, especially in the saltwater, 100% of rods out there are 9 foot. It's the best distance without being too long for the boat or too long for the wind. And it's going to get you the most successful. Some companies make a shorter rod if you're fishing lagoons or, you know, down in the Keys and the mangroves and stuff like that, to be able to kind of fish in tighter spaces. But out here it's 9 foot, and then I set a 8 or a 9 weight, so that would just be the size of the actual weight of the rod, like what it's meant to kind of throw and handle. I'm sorry. Yeah, so reels, they make reels. So reels are weighted a little bit differently. Like rods are 0 through up to 16 weight. 0 is going to catch a little tiny brook trout in New Hampshire. A 16 weight is going to catch a marlin offshore. Reels don't. There's not a reel for every weight, like there's a rod for every weight. Reels usually kind of encompass 2 to 3 weights. Reels for saltwater, like a 7 to 9. But the diameter on those is usually between like 3 3/4 to like just under 5 inches. But really it's what is weighted best with that rod. Some rods are heavy. Some people like a heavier rod because they can kind of beat it up in saltwater, not really worry about it. Some people like super light rods or reels that, you know, you have to be a little more gingerly with, kind of not beat up as much, but they're going to be better for casting all day and stuff like that. The line's going to match the rod weight. And some people, when I first started doing this out west, it was, you would, especially with clients, you know, getting people out that had never fly fished before, you would always put a heavier line weight on than the rod, kind of overline it. And that became a very popular culture, and it kind of dumbed down casting a little bit, because you have this heavier weight line, makes it easier to kind of cast out there without having a lot of skill. The fly line companies kind of caught up and actually just started overweighting their line. So a lot of 8 weight lines out there. Actually, if you look at the grain size of them, they're weighted for 9 weights. So you can still kind of stick with, you don't have to overline anymore, essentially is what I'm saying. And some companies try to make less tapered rods that are kind of more appropriately weighted for a more skilled angler. It will rust. Wash everything after you're done. Even the seal, like especially in saltwater, your reels, you want to get a seal drag. It's not the most important thing in the world if you're not saltwater fishing a ton, because you can, every time you get off the water, just hose it off, take it apart, let it air dry before you put it back together, because as soon as you put it back together, you're trapping all that water inside of it, and that's where you get rust. But if you're serious about, you know, fly fishing in the saltwater, you're going to be wade fishing a lot, where you're going to be in the water, dropping your rod and reel in the water or on the beach or something like that. A seal drag system just means all those components that are making that reel work are kind of protected in there. So you can stick it in the water for 10 minutes, drop it, whatever, and it should not be affected. Yes, sir. Yeah, I would say there's very few saltwater rods now that aren't fast action. There's a few companies out there that just notoriously make slower action rods. Scott, Thomas, Winston. It's actually the 3 big, like, or not the 3 small popular kind of made in America rod companies. Still make mostly medium action rods. They're going to be, when we say fast and slow action, it means if you look at the rod and if you see that bend, and if you go and put, you know, let's say you leaned it on the ground, if you get most of that bend in the first foot or 2 of the rod, that's typically a fast action rod. Yeah, because it's a more dynamic fishing, and that's where it gets a little complicated. easy surface tension, you're making shorter casts, you're making more dynamic casts where you might be casting here, but then you see a little baby tarpon roll over here, so you got to change your angles. And that's where our fishing gets a little technical, because we do want a fast action rod for the conditions we're fishing in, but when we're flood tide fishing up on these grass flats, sometimes you're casting to fish as close to you, and a super fast action rod makes it really difficult to be able to hit you with a flat from this far away. Where a slower action rod is going to give you more control. So it's a balance, but really it comes down to there's a reason there's a lot of cars, sunglasses. It comes down to what works for you. Just because I like this rod with this line on it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to cast it as well, and vice versa. So it really comes down to, first off, don't buy online because you don't know what you're going to get. Go into your local fly shop, cast a bunch of different rods, read a bunch of different reviews, but really the reviews, all the info you're going to get from anybody is not going to matter until you put that rod in your hand and you cast it yourself. And you don't have to go buy the $950 Orvis rod, or the now fly rods over $1,000 to be your first rod. You know, you can get into the sport for a few $100s and not break the bank. It's not, you know, people always say fly fishing is expensive. I'm like, have you heard of offshore fishing or in any other sport? It's not that bad. And you will get into it, and you will end up buying that $1,000 rod because it's obsessive, just like everything else is. And there's a gentleman that used to do these talks with me, John. He used to always say that it's the best hobby to get for someone that wants to give you gifts. There's so many gadgets that are fly fishing related in the world that literally, as soon as you become a fly fisherman, there's tons of options for people to get for you. But it's a ton of fun. You know, you guys living at the landings here, it's like one of the best lagoon systems I've ever seen. The fishing in the lagoons and the landings is incredible if you haven't done it. You want to speak to that a little bit?
One quick note.
And then any questions specifically about fly fishing in our lagoons? Sure.
Could you just talk about?
Yeah.
You
So
provide all these things.
yeah. So alltidecharters.com is my website. We offer 5, 6, and 8 hour charters. It's essentially 5 hours on the water from the time we, leave the dock to the time we get back, whatever. We provide all tackle, whether it's fly or spin. We don't do, like I said, any bait fishing or anything like that. We all fish out of a traditional style flat skiffs, so we take 1 to 2 anglers. I always tell people that book a charter, like, I might take a room to go. There's nothing like spending the entire 5 hours on the bow of the boat. You want to have, if you have the ability to do it, have the opportunity to have a shot at every fish that comes across the bow. And a 5 or even 8 hour trip is pretty phenomenal. We've launched, I fish anywhere from north of Beaufort all the way down to Sapelo Sound. So we don't launch out of a marine or anything like that. And we kind of travel and kind of go where the wind's either telling us to go or what the fishing's been doing. But yeah, you want to make sure, we don't have a T-top or anything. So good sun protection, sunglasses. And then for the longer trips we do, the 8 hour trips we do, provide lunch. But the difference in that, if you've done any kind of weighted fishing trips for trout or float trips for trout or stuff like that, is that, it's a lot more calm in a drift boat or a raft or whatever if you're trout fishing, because you're, moving to runs where when you're flat fishing, it's as soon as you're on that bow, like it's focus time. And it's a lot of fun, but it's, we're there to kind of hunt. So it's yes, sir.
The worst mistake.
I'm gonna give you 2. Same price, yeah, 2 for 1. So trout setting. So if anyone's fly fished here before, especially if you've gone to North Carolina, Georgia, North Georgia, wherever, and you even spin fishing, when you set up like this. And so the dynamics or the mechanics of that does not work for saltwater fishing. You got to realize that fish is here. That fly or lure or even bait is moving towards you because you're stripping that fly in. And so if that fish goes to eat that fly, and you set like that, that moves that up here out of that fish's feeding pattern. But if that fish goes to eat and you just keep stripping, all it looks like to that fish is that that bait that he's trying to eat is getting away from him, and it just makes him want to big time. And so usually, so that's the first mistake is people get that first eat and they go like that, and the fly comes flying out of the water, usually lands back behind the boat, called the atomic hook set. And then the other mistake is just the casting in general. And it's not really like you always hear breaking your wrist is bad, and it is bad. If you watch people that have been casting long enough, you can get away with breaking your wrist. But the thing that I see that probably most people do is hand placement on the rod itself. Having your thumb on the backbone of the rod as you're casting, that's your strongest finger. It gives you a lot more power and direction. And then pretending like you're flicking a paintbrush. You can think of that while you're casting a fly rod. It'll improve your cast instantly. Yeah.
I just wanted to note, if you have not done any fly fishing, here CCA has a nice collection of Orvis rods. So when you come to a bluegill and Bruce, for example, we have the rods there. Instruction is right there. You don't really have to make an investment to start. Anybody have any questions about fishing here? Well, saltwater or freshwater, we have both. You know, if you went bass fishing here, especially now that's a little cooler, the fish are a little deeper, I tie a little Clouser minnow on it. And then in the summer, this is just so much fun, tie a big popper on and have that bass come out of the water and nail that popper. It's a lot of fun. Redfish, again, classic redfish, colorful flies here. Again, you know, our lagoons are, you know, not that deep, 8-10 feet, so it's never like you fishing way down. And so that's what I do. You know, you had a 7-weight rod here, you can fish for anything on our island.
For the saltwater lagoons, the one thing I will say from my experience from a few of my buddies that live out here, small little white flies usually work really well on the black drum, the redfish, and the tarpon. And the closest thing I've been able to find that you can get at the shop downtown Rivers and Glen are little, sorry Charlie's, little gotcha bonefish flies, because they have just a little bit of weight on them, but they're small like this. But you got to realize these lagoons, you're going at them with a fly. Everyone else is going at them with bait, cut mullet. So these fish have seen the encyclopedia of what they're going to get caught on. So you want to throw something that's a little bit different, be a little bit stealthier. But what sets you apart in the lagoons is what's going to make you successful in my experience.
Crazy Charlie.
It's Crazy Charlie, the bonefish fly.
Yeah. Yes, sir. Up and say, water's coming in, that's fish. Water's going out. That's true. Well, yeah, think of it. You know, when the water's coming in, it's bringing bed fish in, little critters in. So if you were a fish, where would you be? You would be looking at that pipe, saying, "Here comes dinner for lunch." I understand that. Good try. No, but I mean, you know, cast right in. The other thing, you know, if you look at any of our lagoons, fresh salt water, you know, fish tend not to sit in the middle of water because it's unprotected. So look for the overhanging tree, look for the vegetation in that lagoon, and, you know, get over there because that's where the little fish are and that's where the big fish are going to ambush them, not sitting out in the middle of nowhere.
Anybody have any more questions?
Is there a shop in town?
There's no other shop in town, but I would definitely recommend you go there. Yeah. But they don't have the knowledge, and that's the issue. You can have all the gear, but if you don't know what you're selling, you're gonna walk out of there with the wrong equipment and be upset. But no, Rivers and Glen, I still have a wonderful relationship with them. They're still my fly trap. They still send me trips. So yeah, definitely Rivers and Glen downtown. There's a few guys there that are super fishy that run it. Abby's the manager, but and then if they don't ever know something, they always call me and ask me. But yeah, if you guys don't have any other questions.
Okay, let's hear it for Chad.
Thank you.
Go right up there.
Thank you. And then, just one last thing, I do have, maybe I need to, but I do have them on the. Don't be afraid to grab them. Thank you.
Okay. Just a couple things before we have Dave here. I wanted to say, for those of you that haven't signed up for the banquet, one of the things you get by going to the banquet is you get a CCA membership. So that's part of the deal. So sign up for the banquet, you get a CCA membership. You bring your spouse, she gets one as well. So that's a $55 value. Those of you that haven't signed up for CCA, not going to the banquet, we can sign you up in the back of the room. One other thing, over to your, behind you over here, Georgia Go Fish, that's the license plate that CCA was instrumental in getting the legislation to pass back in 2017. How many people have that license plate? Okay, great. Chad's got one. We just found out just about a month ago that we passed the $1 million mark for revenue on that plate. So the $20 a year that you pay, have that plate, we now have $1 million that have gone into coastal improvement, habitat improvement for Georgia. So it's just been a great deal for us and for all the people that fish all up and down the Georgia coast. It's really been something, and so it's moved along, and we're very happy. Please renew your plate if you've got one. If you don't have one, go out and get one. Okay, Dave.
Who's that guy up there? Some guy.
So
Over here.
over here, I get carried away. Got to lower this a little bit. There we go. Put the bait down a little lower.
Yeah.
There we go. So we were honored last month. CCA Skidaway Island Chapter was nominated and selected as a volunteer group of the year. And it was quite an honor we received from Atlantic Association. And it was based largely on what we do. So CCA chapter comes back to the residents here on the island. And so there are other very good organizations on the island, Kiwanis to name one of them, Rotary, but a lot of that money goes to off island. Our money that we make here in the chapter stays on island for on island events. In addition to that, we've enhanced the number of programs we're offering here right now. It's situations like clinics. We offer spinning clinics for freshwater, spinning clinics for saltwater, and now we offer fly fishing clinics for the members of the CCA. And so we've expanded our offerings here for the on-island residents and their guests. So it was once again quite an honor. The next, do I have the control? You do. If you click to next, this gives you an idea of what's coming up, because we're coming up into our second quarter now with April. And we have a lot of new events coming on. Number one, we have the banquet coming up. I won't dwell on it any longer. It's a very important event. But we enter in May, we start our kids events. We offer events, introduction to fishing programs for the kids here on the island, but we're also doing off-island children's groups. We do Safe Shelter. We do Salvation Army. We do a New Horizons. It's a combination of Bethesda Academy and Savannah Country Day. We do the Scouts, as Thomas mentioned, and we do the Girl Scouts now. And we've been approached by the Tybee Marine Academy. They want to come out and fish in our lagoons. These are great events, but what it's really all about, this is about volunteering, is the ones in red we need volunteers for, and we really can't do it without our members and our volunteers to be there for crowd control. If you're not a good fisher person, not a good angler, maybe you're good with kids. Maybe you're good for maintaining records while we're working with the kids, or maybe you get your introduction to working with kids. And these off-island kids are great. Some of them have never caught a fish before. And it's really excited when we do. We kid them and say, you need to kiss your first fish. Some of them do. And some of them want no part of that kissing. They don't kiss no fish. So these are some great events that are coming up. Susie Fusco runs our Castaway Club on Saturday morning selectively. We'll have naturalists bring snakes on the island. turtles, bats, whatever. We go for a 45-minute presentation, and then we take them and their parents on introduction to fishing programs at the Kids Lagoon. I think someone asked you, or you mentioned, we don't know how many fish are in that lagoon. The fellow that maintains, that we buy our stocking fish from, it's the management company. He says a 3-acre lagoon like the Kids Lagoon should hold about 3,500 fish. With the artificial environment that we've set out there with our 5 fish feeders, feeding them daily, he estimates there's over 10,000 fish in that lagoon. So if you're going to catch fish, you're going to catch fish at the Kids Lagoon. It's the place to go. And that's why we have our bluegills and brews down there, because we get more utilization. Go down there in the evening, have fun with adults and no kids. So let's move on to the next one. So, with speaker next month, another captain, and it'll be Captain Garrett Ross. He's spoken here before 2 or 3 years ago. He's quite a character. He looks like Johnny Depp, with Johnny Depp character from Pirates of the Caribbean. He really doesn't look that bad, but he will talk about inshore fishing, spring fishing around Wausau, Ossabaw Islands and the like. And so there'll be a chance to go. And then the prize we're offering at a raffle next month is once again another charter. So we're offering some very nice charters as raffle prizes here. It's much easier to win one of these prizes than it is to win the lottery. Okay, so tonight's raffle prize is a charter with Captain Chad, and you're going to make the selection. You're going to pick who you want to go fishing with. Oh, you already know who. What? Yeah, would you trust this guy? Stan?
Before I check the ticket, I gotta tell you one quick fish story. I lived on the landings for over 25 years, moved off, and I moved to Johnny Mercer at a complex. There are 3 lagoons in there, and I toss in crab traps. I get all kinds of blue crabs, and I make all kinds of crab dishes. The other day, after checking my traps, I was on the way back to my place, and there was a gentleman there with his 3 grandsons fishing with small rods and live shrimp. I stopped to talk to the gentleman. I watched one of those kids pull in a black drum this big on a light rod. I didn't even know what the hell it was. I said, "What is that?" He says, "A black drum." I said, "You're tossing that back?" He said, "Well, you're crazy." At any rate, that's the fish story. Make a happy winter here. Yep.
507-229. There we go.
Hey.
Yes, sir.